A lot of new names today. Just going to give it a few minutes while everybody comes into our call. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Sandra. Everybody is welcome to share their video. I want to see your beautiful faces. It's nice to see faces once in a while instead of a blank screen with big initials on it. So please don't be shy. Please share your video with us. We're all here. We're in a safe space. Going to share some stories with each other. There we go. Wonderful. Okay. Perfect. Hi, Juliet. Hi, Deborah. It's good to see your faces. Hi, Sandra. Hi, Andrea. All right, I still see people coming in, but that's okay. Just want to see how many participants so far do we have. Okay, still rising. Just going to give it one more minute, everybody. Just want to make sure that we don't miss the introduction to Claire, because her experience and her background is quite amazing. So I don't want anyone to miss that. I think everyone's getting used to this Zoom thing. Are we? Yeah. I still see some shy people though. Or maybe they're just calling in instead of the video. All right, I think I'm going to start now. So Claire, there you are, I see you there, okay.
I'm here.
So Claire, thank you so much for joining us here today for the WXN Virtual Book Club. We really appreciate your time because we know that how busy you are, and we're so excited to for you to tell us about your journey and share some insights and just some, you know, especially at this time, you know, to encourage women to, you know, continue to, you know, look for their careers and just go for it, right? And not to be afraid, but to also show, you know, we're talking about authentic leadership and vulnerability as well is not considered a weakness anymore. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we can talk about today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And I love your story. Honestly, I've known you for years, probably since I purchased WXN in 2016. But I didn't realize all the amazing things that you've accomplished in your career so far. So thank you for sharing with us today. So I just want to go through and tell you a little bit more about Claire. It makes me wonder what I've been doing with my life. Such an amazing, amazing woman. So I'm just going to read here for you. Claire is an award-winning advocate for the advancement of women. She's an inspirational speaker, a coach, a consultant, and the author of Own It, Your Success, Your Future, and Your Life. An author and co-author of a number of studies on women in mining, politics, and entrepreneurship. She is a recipient of a Fulbright scholarship and a Littauer fellowship by Harvard, a regular conference speaker, and media commentator. Claire is founder of Own Your Own Success, and executive in residence of the Carleton University Center for Research and Education on Women and Work. He's a former founding executive director of the Center for Women in Politics and Public Leadership at Carleton University as well. And I'm excited to say that Clare is one of our very own Canada's Most Powerful Women, Top 100, and she has been recognized 3 times. So we're happy to have her as one of our Top 100 alumni. Other recognitions include the Canadian Women in Communications and Technology, Women of Influence, Embassy of Gabon, Women Who Work Award. I do remember that one. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I realized you had that.
Beautiful statue they give you.
I know, I've seen it. It's great. Congratulations.
Yeah,
when was that, Claire?
It was about a year ago, I think. I think it was last fall. A year ago this fall. Time flies.
Yeah. Congratulations. She's also received awards from Federated Press and WPN and was awarded a Canada 125 Medal for Public Service. She is a lawyer, a former senior executive in the Government of Canada, including roles as Head of Agency for Status of Women Canada and Assistant Deputy Attorney General of Aboriginal Affairs Justice Canada, and former Professor of Law at Dalhousie University, where she was widely recognized for her work, including by the Supreme Court of Canada, respecting freedom of expression and equality. She also serves, or has served, on a number of boards, including the Harvard Women's Leadership Board. She has led delegations for Canada to the United Nations, APEX, Women's Leadership Network, and the Committee of Women of the Organization of American States. And there's so much more. There was so much more. So I just wanted to pull the little snippets here and share them with you. Not little snippets, they're but you can learn more about Clare after this. She has her own website. It's called ownyourownsuccess.com. So if you want to learn any more about her, on her what she does as far as leadership for women and her training and development, and etc., please take a look at her website. So today we're so honored to have you to discuss your book, Own It, Your Success, Your Future, Your Success, Your Future, Your Life, coming from a poor rural childhood in Saskatchewan, which I didn't know that either. That's something new I learned about you. And rising to an executive level career in the nation's capital. Clare has forged her own path to empowerment and success by trial and error along the way. Own It speaks to women everywhere while demonstrating how to truly lay claim to your life on your own terms. So thank you again, Clare. We really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to this session with you.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for that wonderful introduction. And I also want to thank you for all the great work you do with WXN, and especially all the great work you've been doing through COVID to support women, because we know COVID's been particularly devastating for women, and all of the stress and the challenges when you're having to work from home, having a family, and losing jobs. And so I'm actually delighted to be part of the new Prosperity Project, which is focused on COVID-19 and the impacts on women, and seeing how we can ensure that doesn't continue. So thank you again, Sherry, for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Clare, for being here. And I appreciate you, and everybody enjoy your session. I have another meeting, so I gotta go. But
so thank you again, Sherry. And I really want to say welcome to everyone here. I see a few familiar faces, but I can't see all of you, but I see Deborah, who's already zooming in from California, so that's great. But I really thank you for coming today and for taking the time to be with me and to share a little bit of this story around this book of mine. So I thought I'd start, and what I want to do, I don't want to talk for long periods, but really what I'd rather do is talk about a little bit about the why, because we always start with why. If you've read Simon Sinek, you know that you start with why, and I want to start with the why of the book, talk a little bit about some of the things I've learned along the way, and then leave lots of time for questions and answers, because I think it's really important that I hear from you and we have that kind of interaction. So what I'll start with is the why. Why did I write this book? Everybody has stories. Some of us do get around to sharing them, and so many others have amazing stories, and we can encourage you to share them. But I was speaking at an event, and the speaker before me, or maybe it was the speaker after me, was a very successful woman by any account. And she told the story as if it had been easy. And she was she was a vice president in a company, and she was involved in all of these charities. And I had some of the women afterwards that were talking, and I heard them say, you know, I really feel discouraged because I can't do that. I really can't do all of that. It looks like it was so easy for her, and I know it won't be for me. And what they didn't know, and what I didn't know at the time, but I found out later, was that she had a stay-at-home husband who could do everything for her. So it was kind of like the reverse of the man who had the wife at home to support him. So I thought, well, people really need to hear that you can be successful and make all kinds of mistakes along the way and fall flat on your face and pick yourself up again. It's not easy necessarily. But so I wanted to share my story, because it certainly wasn't easy getting to wherever I am now. And I also wanted to say you can be a success no matter where you start. And I think that's a really important piece of all of this, is we all have stories to tell, and we have stories about our background and our origins, and how you tell that story is so important, because you can use your origin story either in a way that holds you back and keeps you in place, or really propels you forward to another, whatever you've defined as success. And I think that's important too. In writing the book, I wanted to help people understand that you own your own success, and you define what success means for you. I mean, we know we're bombarded all the time by what can people hold up as success, whether they're famous movie stars or CEOs, or now on the internet, the ones that become internet celebrities. But for the majority of people, that's not success. I mean, I've seen success in the story of a woman who was a cleaner in a hotel. She was cleaning the rooms, and her great joy and the way it beamed out from her was seeing that the customers and clients who came really had a clean room, felt very comfortable and at home. And for her, that was success. And I've seen that repeated so many times. The nurse that gets great success from seeing her patients get better and know that she's giving them the best care. It isn't all about fame and fortune. And so success is within the grasp of everybody. It's just how you want to define it. And so these are the things that were the reasons why I wrote the book. So what I want to do is say, okay, let's start back in the origin story, and I'll tell you a little bit about my origin story, because as Sherry said, I came from very humble beginnings. And I'm going to read a little bit from my story, because that's what a book club is supposed to be about, right? On page 4, I lived in a 3-room shack with no running water or electricity. When it rained, the roof leaked, and we had to arrange pots strategically to catch the drops. Each pot made a different sound. And so, to our delight and my mother's chagrin, we ended up with our own private symphony. And since my father had built his shack close to a low-lying area, and it really was a shack. If you doubt it, it was really a shack. I mean, it was, it didn't look like a house. We often had floods in our basement, an unfurnished space with no concrete. The smell of early spring water and earth can be very pungent, and I developed a love-hate relationship with that basement. It was a place, after all, where we stored our preserved food, so there was always good things to eat down there. The stairs were steep with no handrails, and when I was 5, I tumbled down the whole flight. Indelibly etched in my memory is the visit I made to the local doctor. He stitched me up without the benefit of anesthetic, and the experience made me wary of the basement for the rest of my years on the farm. All it takes to carry me back is the smell of earth, wet and pungent. And I'm reading again from page 5. At an early age, it dawned on me that we were one of the town's poorer families. Other children had bathrooms in their houses. We had to sprint out to the outhouse, which was a good distance from our house. Probably not a great distance, but as a child, we thought it was a great distance. This was especially scary at night, listening to an eerie kind of a distance while thinking about all the monsters that might be hiding in the outhouse. Our nighttime sprints were never undertaken without over-the-shoulder glances to catch lurking monsters ready to pounce on us. Of course, in reality, the actual monster was the winter. Icy fingers of cold would attach themselves to our tender parts as we tried to get in and out of the outhouse at record speed. The fact that I never did see an actual monster did nothing to tame my fertile imagination. And I think most of you can equate to that idea of monsters when we're children. And so very often during the winter, I'm going to read you one more portion here, Life on the Farm. During the winter, because our roads were not plowed, and I never could understand why they weren't plowed, we paid taxes too, we went to school in a sleigh. If that sounds romantic, conjuring up cheery cinematic images involving closed-in boxes and foot warmers, I can assure you that our sleigh rides were anything but. Ours was an open box on runners pulled by a pair of temperamental horses who loved nothing better than running away with the sled, while my father pulled hard, coat flapping behind him, trying to halt their rush in the wrong direction. To keep us warm, because winters got pretty cold out in Saskatchewan, my father covered us with an old coat made of buffalo hide, something we often quizzed him about. And his story dated back to the post-war period when he worked in lumber camps in winter to make money to support his farm. Freezing, he bought the coat from an Aboriginal man, and it had kept him nice and warm. It kept us warm too, but there was a price to pay. It smelled terrible. We used to tease him that we'd always be safe from animal predators because no self-respecting animal would ever want to come within smelling distance of that coat. So when you think about that and you sort of read through some of these early experiences, you say, well, how did she end up with the career that she did? And I think there are several things, because I say in my background, I noticed at an early age that my mother wasn't terribly happy being a farm wife. And I think that indelibly printed in my mind that perhaps there was something more out there than farm life. Now, there's nothing wrong with farm life. It's a wonderful place. But for me, I had 3 brothers as well, and I noticed that the guys were treated differently. And I think at a very young age, I often had little battles with my mother over the fact that the boys, the ones that weren't helping so much on the farm, didn't have to make beds or do household chores, whereas I had to. And I kind of resented that. So I think I became a feminist at an early age where I saw equality as important. But I also noticed in our town, because we were poor, the people that ran the town tended to, in those days, I thought, look down on those of us that didn't have the same degree of resources. And so I became obsessed at a young age with the idea of power and how it was being used. And I saw law as an opportunity to change how power was viewed and how it was used. Now, of course, when you're a child or when you're young, you look at things through different lenses. And as I got older and more experienced and looked back, I could see that they were doing what they thought they needed to do. And simply because my father, I don't think he cared one way or the other, he wasn't involved in some of that decision making. But I did know, and I did understand that having a career like law was a way to obtain power to make a difference. And for me, one of the things that came from those early years was that drive to make a difference. And that has been my success goal always, is to make a difference. And over my life, of course, I've realized that your idea of success changes over the years. And while it started out being a negative in the sense that I wasn't going to have a life like my mother's, it ended up being quite significantly different when I realized my mother had a lot of good things in her life too. but that only comes with the wisdom of the years. So another thing that I think is really important, and it's something that I learned early on down on the farm, and that was the power and importance of reflection. I had a special place on our farm. It was a pasture. And for me, that was like a sacred space. It was like going to church, but without the building around us. Neither one of my parents was religious, so I was the one that ultimately ended up taking them to church, but that's another story. Anyway, that was my place where I could go, I could feel connected to nature, and where I could reflect. And that was really important because when I went on to finish school, and I decided at age 12 I was going to be a lawyer. I think it was partially watching Perry Mason and some of the other law shows on TV, but I had kind of an image of I would be a criminal defense lawyer and I would save all these innocent people. Of course, over time you realize that most of them are not really innocent. And through a series of events, I didn't end up doing that, but it was a nice thought at age 12. So when I did leave high school, there was no money to go to university, but I did win some scholarships and I worked every summer. And at the beginning of the first year, I thought, oh, law school is so long. I don't think I'll go to law school. I think I'll do chemistry and work in a crime lab. But then I went to see the associate dean of the law school. And remember, this was a long time ago when there was very few women in law school. But he was amazingly encouraging and really encouraged me to pursue my dream of law. And so I decided to plunge in and do it. And I did so well in the first year because when I looked around, our professors were constantly saying, look around you, only 2 out of 3 of you will be here at the end of the year. Because they took great pride at that time in failing people, which I never understood. And when I became a law professor, I certainly never had that attitude. But I worked so hard that I ended up pretty well at the top of my class and won some scholarships. So at the second year, the pressure was very high to succeed because failure really wasn't an option. When you had no money and you had no family money, failure really wasn't an option. So I was feeling extremely stressed and I was wondering if I would make it through my exams. But I remembered my special place and I went out to the farm and I went out to my special place because university was only an hour from my home. And I sat there and I reflected on where I was going and what I was doing, and an incredible peace came over me. And I knew at that moment that I could do it and I was on the right path. So I've learned over time how important reflection is and how we can use it for so many reasons. And it's an ongoing process. And I'm just going to read you a little bit about what I wrote about reflection. Just a very small snippet for you here on page 28. Reflection is an ongoing process. No matter where we are in our journey, taking time to create a quiet space where we can think about our lives and our daily encounters is key to carving out a rich, full existence. Reflection can be a way to keep us grounded, as well as to examine the status of our dreams. Are we living them, or have we let them go somewhere along the way? A woman I know had dreams of getting a degree, and yet she felt stuck in her current situation. University meant full-time study, and money was tight. How many of us know that history? With coaching and with her own introspection, she made the decision to do it, getting started by signing up for one course at a time. Did she fulfill her dreams? Yes, I'm happy to say she did, and she moved on in a role far more in harmony with her new vision of her future. We need to figure out if we're living our dreams or someone else's. If it's someone else's, we may find ourselves disengaged and yet unable to say why. Change is possible through reflection, by which I do not necessarily mean meditation. People think immediately of meditation, but you can reflect in so many different ways. And it means stepping back from our busy lives sometimes and consider deeply what is happening in the moment or what has happened in the past. We can often come to understand its influence. Sometimes all it takes is to just let go and see what thoughts and new ideas come. Call it a timeout. Except when, of course, when you're children, a timeout may not be a good thing, but for us as adults, a timeout can be really important. And so that's one of the things I've learned along the way is how important reflection is. and how important it is to success, because it does keep you grounded and it enables you to really get perspective. How many times have you done something or gone to a meeting and said something and then came out saying, oh my God, I said the stupidest thing. This is the worst thing that ever happened. And really, until you stepped back, you really looked at it and said, really, was it as awful as all that? Are they going to fire me because I said something? The rest of the people, especially the guys, said stupid things all the time and nobody thought they were stupid. So it's being able to put that in perspective. Or when someone criticized you, being able to put it in perspective and say, is that really so? And so I think reflection is one of the ways, and in times of COVID-19, I think it's even more important now for us to be able to step back, reflect. And in some ways it's been an opportunity because we haven't been able to do our normal rushing around. So it is a time to say what is really important and what is really valuable in our lives. And do I need to redefine what success is for me? And another key thing that I learned is if you follow your passion, you will be successful. And that's not always easy because we know that the journey can be difficult and it takes a lot of determination to reach a particular goal. But if you lose that passion, you may find that you're no longer feeling in harmony, that you're not enjoying what you're doing. And so I just want to read a little bit again because I was told this is a book club, so we need to read. From all my coaching experience, helping women in transition in their lives, I believe that we can rekindle our passions and either realize our dreams or move toward new ones. One woman I coached hated her job. She was in finance and came with a handsome salary, but the hours were brutally long. She had no time for herself and her music that she so loved, and she felt trapped. Her piano sat idle. So I asked her the simple question, why do you stay in the job if you hate it so much? What is it costing you to stay? Then I suggested she think deeply about what really mattered to her. And several months later, she did quit her job. She reflected, she quit her job, and she took a little time off. And then she went to work in the nonprofit sector, doing the kind of work that she had the qualifications for, but was really passionate about and felt she could make a difference. I know I've talked to people all along the way, and it's happened to me too. I mean, I lost my passion at a certain point. And I remember when I first became Assistant Deputy Attorney General Aboriginal, it was about a year in, and my energy was very low. And I was talking to an Inuit elder, and he said to me, your energy is low. Why aren't you using your gifts? And I guess I was kind of blown away because I'm saying, well, I'm here, I'm doing this big job. What do you mean about my gifts? But he, like all, the gurus sitting on the top of the mountain, he wouldn't tell me. So I was offered at that point in time a cottage by a friend, and I took a book and I sat there for 3 days and I reflected and I realized some of the things that were missing in my life and in the life of the organization I belong to, including we never talked about leadership and how I had been dealing with consistently people who did not know about leadership, didn't understand, and didn't know how to be good leaders. So that began my journey. It was like one of those transformational moments when you realize your life's about to change again and in different ways. And so from that point on, I started talking about leadership. I started pushing at the executive table for us to consider leadership. I took courses, I understood it, and I tried to be a better leader myself. Because as you know, along the way, when you read my book, you'll see all of the different obstacles that I bumped into along the way. And one of the things that also had been going on in my department, and I was part of it too, is all of us women were feeling like victims. We were feeling like victims because we felt that women were not getting the promotions, men were getting them. And it took Barbara Annis to come along and say, you're all in victim mode, you're giving up your power. And that was an amazing piece of insight to say, if we stayed in victim place, we were giving up all of our power. And so having that insight enabled you to change and be able to see that, no, I need to be empowered, and the only person that can do that is me. So I learned many things following that, including the importance of networks, and also another thing that so often, and Sherry did talk about it, when she talked about our fears. Because if we are passionate, if we want to move ahead with our vision or our dreams, fear can get in our way. Now, does that mean we have to be fearless in the sense that the word is sometimes used, though most of the time it's not used that way? Because fearless really means having the fears and deciding to do it anyway. And that is something that is really important, is to be able to say, you know, I do have fears, and that's okay. What's not okay is if they hold me back and I'm not able to move forward. And so it is about thinking about how do we move forward in spite of those fears. And do I still have fears? Of course, we all do. Some of them I've learned to say they don't matter. I don't need to worry about getting over them. One of them is I hate cliff edges. Do I need to worry about that? No, I can just stay away from cliff edges for the most part. If I had to rescue someone I love from a cliff edge, would I do it? Yes, I would do it. But for the most part, I don't need to. But if I have a fear of speaking up at meetings, if I'm afraid to go after what I want, do I need to change that? The answer is yes, if I want to achieve my dreams. But I remember the worst, and this is the last reading I'm going to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about a fear that I'm sure there's a few of you may have encountered through a brother or a friend. But in 2009, I learned that our oldest son would be leaving for Afghanistan. He was an infantry officer and would be sent to the combat zones. Then in May 2010, he departed for Afghanistan in a heavy season of combat. His command took him to a post in the heart of the combat. Prior to this time, I had watched other mothers and families be completely stressed, fearing the worst until their son or daughter returned. I found myself in the position for several weeks, worrying constantly. I was afraid of losing my son in combat, as I think any mother or sister or anyone can understand. Finally, I decided that my worrying and fearing the worst would not help, and I turned my focus to supporting him, which was something that I could contribute and I could control. I had no control over what would happen and had to decide my control was in my own mind. I could interpret the negative fear and thoughts with positive thoughts that he would return. He was in an IED blast. We almost lost him, but he did return. And that was again another lesson in not letting our fears stop us. Because I had people say to me, why did you let him go? And you know, when you look at an adult person, you say, it's not about letting them go. They make their own choices, and he made his choices. And so that's so important for all of us, the choices we make around whether we're going to pursue that passion or we're going to let our fears hold us back. And there may be a cost either way. It's not easy, but if you look back at your life later, you're probably not going to regret the things that you did, but you may regret the things you didn't do and the dreams you didn't fulfill. So I'm going to stop at this point because I really want to hear from you with questions. And I know that, Virginia, you're going to be the one that are going to be fielding these questions. So are there some questions now?
Okay, so you can raise your hand if you like, and I can unmute your microphone. If you'd like to ask it directly, you can write a question in the chat box. And I do have some questions that came from our audience upon registration as well. So I'll give people a few minutes. Oh, I got something in the chat here. Oh, so Rosalind asks, were there any women of color in your law program?
Not when I was going to law school, but I'm trying to think back when I was teaching, and yes, we had some actually Indigenous women and men in the program, because the University of Saskatchewan had started a program for Indigenous. And yes, in Nova Scotia, we did have some other women and men of color. Not as many as there are now, because you have to remember this was back in the 1970s. But I know in all the leadership work I do, we have a number of women of color who are always participating in our programs, which makes it so wonderful because of the diversity.
Okay. Andrea asks, how do you manage negative self-talk?
Oh, yes. And that is something, that little voice in your head, right? That is telling you you can't do something or you're not going to be able to do it. And I'll share with you my secret. I was very lacking in self-confidence. I had the imposter syndrome big time. And when I went to law school and when I started teaching, I kept thinking, when are they going to find out I'm not as smart as they think I am? And it took me a long time to overcome that, because I had some, in my book, I tell you some of the horrible situations where I had horrible managers who said terrible things to me that I would never say to anybody. But I learned over time that the negative self-talk is a big part of that imposter syndrome. So one of the techniques that I've used is to interrupt it when it starts and substitute something positive. If that negative little voice starts to say you can't do something, say, no, stop. I can do this. And here's why. And I think it's also keep reminding yourself of all the times you've encountered a difficult situation and you've come through it. And that builds your confidence, that builds your strength. And if you keep reminding yourself, because we have a tendency sometimes to minimize what we've done, right? It's a habit of women to do that, is to minimize what we've done. Because when someone says, oh, that was a great job, and you say, oh, it was nothing. And you go, oh, no, it wasn't nothing. You spent months doing that work, yet you've minimized it because you're supposed to be modest, which we know isn't so. So hopefully that answers that.
So Juliet says, oh, sorry. We have a comment. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Wonderful inspiration today. Juliet says, similar to Andrea's question, how do you find the resiliency from an early age to look beyond your circumstances?
And I think thank you for that question. That's a really important thing, is building resiliency. And I guess I was fortunate in many ways to have grown up poor on a small farm in Saskatchewan, because you see resilience every year. It's very difficult being a farmer and having a small farm like my father had, because you were subject to the weather. The crops, you could never guarantee the crops were going to come in, because you would have a wonderful crop and then all of a sudden there'd be an influx of grasshoppers. And I don't know how many of you have ever seen grasshoppers hopping everywhere, but it's not a fun thing when they're all over your head and your body and your mother's yelling at you, get those grasshoppers off you before you come in the house, you know. So it could be grasshoppers. You'd have a great crop and along would come a hail. Or you're ready to harvest, snow comes, covers up the crop. And yes, you might be able to harvest it later, but it's lost some of its quality. But the farmers, my dad couldn't just quit and say, oh, I'm done. He had to carry on because there was no choice. He had a family to feed, right? And all the farmers around. So they would just dig deep. And that's when I learned about resilience and what you could control. Because as a farmer, you can't control the weather. You have to go with the seasons. You have to go with the flow. You can get insurance now, and that's really important, but you can't control those things. And so you have to think ahead. You have to have enough. If you're going to plant wheat every year, before Monsanto came along and makes it impossible to seed if you use their seeds, but you have to have enough in storage. So if you don't get a good crop this year, you're going to be able to plant for next year. And my father was diversified. Remember that old expression? Well, it's not such an old expression. Never put all your eggs in one basket. Well, it's literally true, of course, because as a farmer, he had crops, but he also had cattle and pigs and chickens, so that if the crop failed, at least he could sell a few cattle and feed his family. And we had milk and we had eggs. We really bought very little food in those days because we either grew it picked it from the wild, and my mother canned and did everything. So you would not starve. You would not starve. So yes, and I think throughout your life, resiliency is something that happens when you encounter challenges and you realize you got through it. right? How many of you have never had a challenge to face? I think probably none of you. I mean, everybody faces challenges. And I think the people that survive the best are those that face some of the hardest challenges, get through them, and know that they can do it again. Because every time you run up against something, you realize, okay, I can get through this. And it gets easier each time, no matter how challenging it is, because you know that you can do it, right? And so it is building that resilience and telling yourself, don't give up. Don't give up. Never give up. I mean, you can fall flat in your face, and I've fallen flat in my face, literally and figuratively, more than once. But you have to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and have a good cry. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a good cry, because I know that oftentimes when something doesn't go right, you go home, you have a good cry, and then you say, okay, enough. No, I used to maybe it would take me a week to recover. Now I just allow myself a couple hours and I say, okay, now what are you going to do about it? And that's what's important. Figuring out, okay, something hasn't worked out. What am I going to do about it? And I honestly had a recent experience. I just share with you quickly. I was helping my youngest son move this summer. And he had booked movers. He was in a 10th floor of an apartment in downtown Toronto, and he was moving out to an acreage in south of Calgary. And so I was in at 1:30. The movers were supposed to come. He called the movers and they said, no, you didn't confirm. And he said, yes, I did. Well, they said, we have no movers. So there he is with an elevator booked, a truck sitting outside, and no movers. So of course, after his initial fit, because I've been through a lot more, I said, okay, let's figure out what we can do. Called his brother, called a friend, and can you come and help? And yes, they could come and help. Now in the end, through another long story, I did get some other movers, so we didn't have to use them. But it was my years of experience of saying, okay, we got a situation. Let's quickly shift to what do we need to do here to make it better or to deal with it? And that comes through experience as well. I think it's one of the things I've learned over the years. So I know there's some more questions there because I saw Deborah put a question forward.
Yeah, so Rosalind had just commented on the negative talk. She said, the negative voice isn't you, so notice it and brush it aside and love yourself.
Yeah.
And she said that from Louise Hay's mirror talk or mirror work.
Right.
And then, yeah, Deborah is speaking to your actual book. So can you describe your creative routine or process while you were writing On It?
That's an interesting one because, you know, it is finding that inspiration every day to write. But I think it is also self-discipline, is saying every day I'm going to write a certain amount. I'm going to give myself an hour or two to write. And some days it's really easy and some days it isn't. It sort of depends on the space you're in. I mean, you can't write if your mind is troubled by a whole lot of other things, but if you can let it go and really focus on saying, how important is what I'm doing to me? If this is really important, I'm going to put my energy and my time on it. But I mean, I'll tell you honestly, there were days I couldn't write a page, couldn't write a word. And then other days it would just flow. So I learned sometimes, okay, if I'm having one of those days where nothing's coming, just step back, go for a walk, do something to change your mental mindset. And usually when you come back, you can find the way to get through it. And I've learned that because I write a lot of things now and other reports. And the other day I had to edit something and I had been on Zoom calls and I thought, I just can't do this. I can't do this right now. So rather than fuss it, I just said, okay, I'll do it tomorrow morning. I got up the next morning, my mind was clear. I whipped through it in no time. So I've just learned to be gentle, forgive yourself. And I do love Louise Hay, Rosalind. She's, ever since I saw her first book on healing, I've thought she was magnificent. So I love to hear your stories too. I mean, and thanks for that kind of feedback, Rosalind.
So Corral commented, I've always said, if you have the energy to complain, you have the energy to find a solution.
I think that's a wonderful statement. And you know, that's absolutely true because the truth is, what does complaining get you? You know, when you think about it, I was in the store the other day, and one of the clerks was really a little agitated, and I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Oh, the previous customer was just berating me about things." And I said, "You know, that's so sad for you, because you're putting yourself out here to serve us every day." And so I spent a little bit of time trying to encourage him that, you know, most of us really appreciate what you're doing. And yes, complaining is victim mentality, and you don't want to be there, because I used to do this when I had team members come in and complaining about something. I would listen, then I'd say, "Well, what do you want me to do about it?" Most of the time, they didn't want me to do anything. They just wanted to complain. So other times I would say, "You know, that's a really great issue and concern. Why don't you go do some research on it and get back to me with some solutions?" That's a great one for stopping people from coming to you with complaints. If you tell them, "Well, that's great, I'm glad you brought that, but how about you come up with some solutions?"
Yeah, that's Sherry's style too. If we ever have a problem, we have to tell her the problem and then tell her a number of suggestions of ideas as solutions, and then she'll jump in and help us out on that.
Well, I think it really encourages people to think about how you can solve your own challenges. I mean, there's nothing wrong with seeking advice, and we all need help and advice at times. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, it's your life and your decision, right? Yes. So you have to make that decision. I was talking, I'm a lead coach for this She Boot process through Invest Ottawa right now. And one of the women was saying, "You know, I get all this advice, I become almost overwhelmed by it." And I said, one of the things you have to do is think it's only advice, and you only need to do what you think is right. People can give you all kinds of advice, and a lot of times, I'm sure many of you have experienced this, where people will say, "Oh, don't do that, it's too risky, you know, this will be a disaster and a mistake." And if you listen to them, then you would not do anything, right? You would not achieve your passion or your dreams. So if you ask for advice, you can listen to it, decide if it's something that benefits you or helps you or not. And if it doesn't, then let it go. And if you get unsolicited advice, it may be good or it may not, right?
Yes.
Like, "I hate that dress you're wearing, you shouldn't wear it." You say, "Well, I love it." So there's a few other choice words you could say in that instance, but we try to be nice.
We had a lot of questions that came through in registration. I wanted to go through some of those. Oh, this is actually kind of more another book one. So what book that you've read personally has inspired you and brought about change in your ideas?
Whoa, now that's a tough question, because I read so much. I think some of the books around the art of Zen, for example, just some of the books around spirituality that have helped, because they ground you, they get you thinking into another plane about your life. I really liked Simon Sinek's Start With Why, because I think it got you back to the beginnings, and leaders eat last, because it really inspires you to say leadership is like servant leadership. It is not being out there and being at the front all the time. It's often being behind and helping people move forward, you know. So, but there is another one, and I'm struggling to remember the name. That's one of the things about getting older, is you have a good memory, it's just shorter. It tends to get shorter. So I will think of that. As I say, I've read so many books, and I've been inspired by a number of them. So it's hard to just pinpoint one and say it. I suppose one of them, and it was long before most of your time, was Judy LaMarche's book on The Bird in the Gilded Cage, because she was the first female cabinet minister, and she was a force to be reckoned with. And I didn't want to emulate her style, but she was a person that, when there were no role models to look up to, at least she offered the possibility that you could be a success as a woman in the legal profession or in politics, where she was, despite all of the challenges that were faced at that time. So if I think of it, another one as I'm going along, I'll come back with those.
Okay. Another question that came through, how do you attempt to change the perception of men who believe that only a man can do the job?
Well, I think one thing is doing the job, right? Putting in the effort and demonstrating that you can do the job. It's also being, I would use the word assertive, but not aggressive. I mean, it's very important. And I don't support aggression, whether it's men or women, and I think women get really affected when they are aggressive, although I have seen some and they've made it to the top, but most people find that very hard. But it's being assertive. It's not letting other people tell you what you should do or what you shouldn't do. And that is in the workplace as well, because I know I had a deputy minister who thought I was pretty aggressive. I wasn't being aggressive, I was being assertive. But I learned how to navigate around him, so to speak. And part of that was learning how to frame things differently so that you could be heard. So rather than going directly at the guys, because that doesn't work very often, it's being able to try to understand, what is it that is causing this in their minds? Is it an unconscious bias? Is it a fear that they're going to not be able to have a job because all these women are coming along? You know, so it's really sometimes to think about, where are they coming from and how can I message that in a way that says, having women here and doing this work actually benefits you. It doesn't hurt you. And, you know, I think we have these conversations with spouses. We have them with our parents. You know, we've had them with various people in our lives, because there are people, and there still are people, who think, not consciously necessarily, that women well, there are some that think consciously, let's be honest, there are, but there are many that it's an unconscious thing. They see leaders with a particular approach, a particular leadership style, and women's leadership style doesn't always follow that, nor should it, if we're going to be authentic leaders. So I think it is what I learned, and it's a conversational style that I did through a coaching program, and it's called speaking to the listening of the other person. And so that's how you try to frame things, is think, where are they coming from? What matters to them? And how do I enable them to understand that what I do can be done by a woman? So I don't have all the answers. I mean, there's lots of people on here that have other experiences and can give you, and I don't profess to have all the answers. I have lots of questions lots of times, but I certainly wouldn't ever profess to have all the answers or to tell you how to live your life. Just simply, if there's things that can help you, then that's great.
Wonderful. Okay, I have an audience question. I'm a new mother. Do you have any advice about balancing motherhood and a career? So that's from Pascal.
Right. Well, I've done it. But I would tell you right off the bat, throw out the word balance. If we think we need to be balanced, we're in trouble, because we're never, or rarely ever, balanced. You know, we're like on a teeter-totter, and sometimes we're at the bottom and sometimes we're at the top. And that's okay, because it really is about the priorities. It's about choosing things that are most important. In any given day, you might have a different priority. For example, your baby's sick. What's more important, being at home with the baby or being at work where you'll forget the next day or 2 days later what you were doing that day? So I think it's prioritizing. I've always said, get all the help you can get. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, I'm a grandmother now, and my son has no problem asking for help. So, you know, I end up going 4 hours to babysit at times just because they need the help. But ask for help. Prioritize things around your home. Like, is it really important to have the cleanest house on the block? And my answer was absolutely not. If that interferes with spending time with your children, with your priority around your work, then if you can afford to get someone to come in and clean, do it. If you can get help from someone else, do it. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because it's not easy. It's not easy being a mother. And of course, the guilt. I mean, it's Arianna Huffington who said, when the baby's born, the baby comes out, they put the guilt in. And, and that's been true with a lot of us women, is that when we're at work, we feel guilty because we're not at home. When we're at home, we feel guilty because we're not focusing on our work. And I think it's getting rid of that and saying, prioritize when we're here. The guys can do this quite well. They can prioritize when they're at work, they're at work. When they're at home, they're at home. And I think that is something we can learn from men, is how to do that and say, you know what? It's good for us to have a career if that's what we want, if that's what we're passionate about. If we choose to stay at home for a period of time, that's our choice. As long as that's our choice, that's great too. There's no one right or wrong solution. I mean, I had a nanny, make no bones about it. I had a nanny. We would not have been able to do or have a 2-career family and do the kind of things without a nanny. And yes, it meant that financially we had far less to spend, but you know what? It was worth every penny just to know that we could do this. I think it's also being kind to yourself and recognizing that you do not need to be a superwoman. Superwoman is bad. You just need to find a way to integrate your work and your life in whatever works well for you. Yeah, Superwoman's a fiction. Yeah, that's right, Rosalind. Superwoman is a fiction. There's no question about it. Although we all have superpowers, but we're not all superwomen. And I learned that too. I mean, I learned that kids don't care if you bake the cookies or not, or if you send the Timbits to school when something's needed. In fact, they probably prefer the Timbits, right? So it's just letting go of a lot of things and just learning to say, what's my priorities today? Every day, what's my priorities? What do I need to do? Who can help me if I need help? And going from there. So I hope that's of some help to you.
Yeah, that's a great answer. This is a more personal question. Where is your happy place in Canada?
Where's my happy place in Canada? Well, I mean, my happy place has to be wherever I am, right? So, but where I loved as a child was that pasture on the farm, as I described. I do love being by the ocean. I always find the ocean very soothing, and so I love going to Nova Scotia or out to the West Coast and just sitting by the ocean. And I love, you'll find this interesting, I love storms. I absolutely love a storm. So if it's bring it on. If it's a thunder and lightning storm, I love it. If it's a snowstorm, I love it. It's something about the power of nature and how it reminds us, we are not all powerful. Mother Nature, as we see time and time again, is much more powerful than we are. And so it is really learning to live in harmony with our nature. But I love it. I love the outdoors. I really do. I'm happy when I'm outdoors, if I'm in the woods or walking or hiking. But most of the time, my happy place is just being with the people that I love and knowing that I'm on my path that I want to be on. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So how long until you learned you could be successful and that you found your personal power?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because it creeps up on you. I guess I learned when I went to law school that, wow, I could do as well as anybody else in the law school class, even though I didn't have their backgrounds, because I do say it in my book. My mother had a grade 8 education. My father had grade 10. So I never learned about art and history. Well, history in school, yes, and I loved it. About art and politics and China and all of these fine things about making a fancy home, right? And so when my friends would be talking about things like the art or whatever, I didn't know it. But I realized I had to self-educate myself over the years. But I think when I realized I could keep up with them, when it came to the academics, I began to realize, oh, that's not so bad. And then I went to graduate school. And then when I started teaching law, I ran into some obstacles the first time I went up for a promotion. Group of men, old men, denied it. And I was pretty upset. And of course, I shed a few tears. And a colleague of mine came along and he said, Claire, don't get mad. Just show them that they're wrong. And he was right about that. So the year later, they could not refuse my promotion because I just went back to work and said, okay, I'm going to make it impossible for them to refuse that promotion. And I realized, you know, I could be a success. And then in my academic career, I started getting calls for people to speak at events. I started writing, I started doing things. And that's when I began to really strengthen my confidence and realize that I could do these things. And then when I was asked to come to the government and do a job that nobody knew how to do, it took me a couple of months to figure out, okay, I can do this. We'll just have to figure it out as we go. And that was an important lesson I learned there, is that you don't have to know how to do something. You can figure it out as you go. So don't let that stop you that you don't know how to do it. I love the story. One of the entrepreneurs, when we were doing entrepreneur interviews, one of them said, I started my company and I went after this big contract, and to my surprise, I got it, and I didn't have a clue how to fulfill it. But I had the contract, so I figured it out and got on with it. And I love that. I love that chutzpah that she exemplified of let's just do it, you know. And I guess one of the inspirations for that is always, he's a male, but Richard Branson is someone that I find very inspirational because he just does it, right? Mm-hmm. And he says it sometimes in language that maybe you wouldn't say in a boardroom, but he does.
Yes, yeah. Okay, from the audience, I'm sorry, I don't have the person's first name. What are the 3 most important lessons you have learned in life?
Wow, these are tough questions. Okay, one is, and it is the reason for the title of the book, is you need to own your own success. No one else is going to do it for you, you know. And if you don't own your success, if you don't recognize that it's up to you, you're not going to be successful. And again, it's defining what success means for you, not getting sucked in. One of the lessons is not getting sucked into that external sense of what is success, right? Choosing what it is for you. Not everybody's going to be a rocket scientist. Not everybody's going to be a movie star. But every one of us can be successful in whatever way we choose. So I learned that. And I learned that communication is so important, about how you say things, the way you say them, and who you say them to. Because it is really important to leave people feeling empowered after a conversation, not feeling like, oh my God, that weighed me down and it didn't go well. So really learning how to listen and I do it because I've done a lot of coaching and mentoring. Listening is so important because you listen for the words they're saying, but you also listen to what's coming from here. And so often you'll really figure out what's going on when you're listening beyond the words. And I've listened to someone say something and then I said, well, let me understand. I think this is what's challenging you. And it wasn't what they said, but it got right to the heart of what was going on. So I think being able to listen and then speak to the other person's listening is so important. A skill, no matter what you're going to do in life. And then the third one, as I think it's one of the things I started with, is how important passion is. Like, passion will drive you where you want to go. And if you're not feeling it, then that's the time to step back and reflect and say, what happened? What happened here? Because we all do it. In 2009, when I made the decision to leave the government because I was getting really beaten up by the minister I had at the time. And I really was not, I was feeling that I was becoming someone I didn't want to be. So I left much earlier than I planned, and I didn't have any plans for what I was going to do next. But I said, this is an opportunity to take that time to reflect and think about, what do I really care about? And from that came my work now about advancing women's leadership. continuing to work on diversity and inclusion, because I realized that's what I really care about. That's what I'm passionate about. I love to mentor and work with young women, or women of all ages. I've done work with women in transition, and I really love that. And so recognizing that that was my passion, I refound my passion again, and understood that for me, having that purpose, the purpose being to make a difference, no matter where or what, was so important to getting up every day and feeling energetic and saying, let's just do it. But also in another thing that I think it's part of that is really focusing on what it is that you want to do, what it is you want to do, and not be all over the place. Like I turned down a number of things because they don't fit into what I want to do now. And I focus my energy on where I can make that difference. And so I think that's important too, is not spreading our energy out all over the place. Mm-hmm. So we don't accomplish anything.
Okay. If you could change any decision that you made in the past, would you?
Would I change any decision? That's a tough one. You know what? If I changed anything, I wouldn't be where I am now. So yeah. Would I have wished I knew a lot of things earlier? You bet. I wouldn't have made so many mistakes, especially around when I became a new manager and a new leader. I wouldn't, like, one big mistake was thinking I had to be nice all the time. You know, and there's nothing wrong with being nice, but there are times you have to make tough decisions. And it's hard. It's hard. Every one of us finds that very hard, but at times you have to make them. Because the first time in my first management job, I had two very difficult people and a woman who was manic depressive. And boy, did I not handle her well. It was terrible. But I learned through that trial and error, the next time I didn't make the same mistake. We had a bit of a code. So when this woman, the next job, because I seem to have had one in every one I was leading after that, but I learned at the second one to say, okay, she was having what she described as a bad hair day. So I didn't ask her to do anything on a bad hair day. We just let it be. And when she was having the good day again, we would get on with things. But it was things, but I also learned if there was conflict, I couldn't leave it. I had to deal with it. And I had to deal with it firmly and effectively. Being fair, but you still have to deal with it. And so, yes, absolutely.
Okay. What was your, oh, sorry, people are throwing stuff in. Okay. What was your process to discover what you really care about? So, example, did you journal? Did you reflect on the past? Did you try new things?
Mm-hmm. And those are all good questions, or all good possibilities. I didn't journal so much, but I spent a couple of months really thinking about what had happened, what had gone wrong, and what I wanted to do next. A friend of mine had lost her mother, was really upset. So I went down and spent 10 days with her at the cottage. And that was really good because I was spending my time helping her with her grief, but at the same time I was working through, in a sense, my own grief at having left the government earlier than I planned, and recognizing that I needed to make a change in my life. And then I went to Saskatchewan to visit my family, and there's a park in southern Saskatchewan called Grasslands. And I rented it was like an apartment in a campsite. And I spent a couple of days there just being in the park. I went horseback riding, I did some hiking, and really letting the thoughts come in until I began to realize, I thought back to Status of Women, and I had helped create 3 pillars. And one of them was advancing women's leadership, that we could not achieve equality, we could not end violence, we could not have economic empowerment for women if women weren't in places where decisions were being made. So that's when I realized this is where I wanted to put my energy. And then I started talking and thinking about a center, and from that evolved the center. It didn't turn out the way I planned, but that was one thing I've learned all the way along, as I mentioned, that is just be open. You have a plan, you have a passion, you have a vision, you're going along in a direction, and guess what? It changes. And one door shuts on your face, but another one opens. And you have to be open to that. And so the center didn't work out the way I planned. We thought we'd get an endowment and we'd have this live center. Well, it turned out to be, we ended up making a virtual center and just getting out, doing work that brought us credibility. And then in time, we realized we needed a program for women's leadership. And so worked on that, got a sponsorship, gradually merged this center, started working, met Janice McDonald. We started working together, whose sister is here on the call, which is wonderful. We started working together around women entrepreneurs. It's been a tremendous partnership, doing studies. And so it's evolved. And I've learned to say yes to the things that I feel can make a difference and will advance women's leadership, and no to the things that just get in my way. So it was an evolution, but a lot of reflection of what I had learned earlier in life, you know, reflection and how important it is. And you can do it anyway. Some people do really well with journaling. I've never been great at journaling. And I'll admit it, I'm not great at meditation either. Not sitting with my legs crossed in a room. But walking, yes, walking meditation works well for me.
Okay. I have a comment from Kathy. It says, thanks for the inspiration, Claire. I love the think like a farmer resilience message. Good crop, bad crop, weather the storm.
Yeah. And that's sort of says it so well, because that is what our life is about, really, isn't it? You have to weather the storms along the way.
Yeah. Okay. How can women or men support women to succeed? Thinking younger generations face the same issues as 30 years ago.
And that's kind of sad, isn't it? That the younger generation is still facing many of the issues that we thought, so many of us thought would be resolved by now. Because I think back when I was young, this was at the time of the beginning of women really coming into the workforce. I mean, the ending of the Vietnam War, the protests, and we thought we really were going to achieve equality. I think it's really important for women, as we rise through whatever in our lives, that we reach back and pull up other women, that we mentor them, that we support them, and women of all backgrounds and all diversity. I mean, I was really sad to have a young woman say to me, you know, she's Black, that I've never had any help from white women. And that really bothered me. And I said, well, you have help now because I'll help you. But it was that we need to reach across. We need to reach for those that are struggling, no matter where they're coming from. And I know that when I do advancing leadership programs, we do encourage them to have mentors, but also to mentor others. And being able to mentor, whether it's a young man or a young woman, because you can actually help young women by helping young men and helping them see that it's so important. But I do a lot of mentoring and coaching, and I'm always in awe of young women, like one this week who just reached out to me and said, I want you to be my mentor. I'd never met her before. But I said, okay, I'll meet you and we can talk. And I was able to help her, and will probably continue to be able to help her. But I think that's really important. It's important to, wherever you see things, that you can reach out and help another woman do it. We don't want to see women putting other women down. We don't want to see women fighting with each other. That doesn't mean that you have to, like in a political realm, that you have to support the views or vote for a certain woman. But you might still give them money for their campaign, because it's important that women run.
Mm-hmm. How do you, I'll see if you can answer this question. It's a little off topic a little bit, but how do you recognize and eliminate unconscious bias on boards and in C-suite? Is that something?
Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, I think the way they talk about unconscious bias training, and there's been a lot of that in a lot of organizations, and they're now showing it doesn't always work, because you do it and then you go away. I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to have a challenge function. On a board or in an organization, you need to have, whether it's HR or a senior leader, be there challenging in the boardroom. You know, why did, when this was said, what did you mean? or challenge them saying, you're treating so-and-so differently than so-and-so. I have been on and am on a number of boards. One was our hospital board, and I ultimately became chair of it. And along the way, I would hear some of the men saying things. And so I would just gently say, I think you should not be saying these words. You may want to substitute these words. And just in a very gentle way, help them understand that when they said or did something, it was actually speaking against what women brought to the table, or what people of diversity brought to the table, men or women. And also making sure that, for example, when I was chair of the board, making sure that all the board members had an opportunity to speak and felt comfortable with doing it. Because yes, as you're saying, Rosalind, you don't want to shame them. That's not about shaming. That's the worst thing you can do. It's more about helping them see how they can be actually champions and supporters of women. And how, because so often we see it in this whole discussion right now around diversity and prejudice and racism, is we say things without understanding how they land sometimes for other people. So it's really opening that dialogue and starting to talk about how can we share these kind of things in a way, and so we're all different, but we all want many of the same things. So it is that saying, women are not all one thing, men are not all one thing. So let's have the dialogue. Let's quietly and effectively use means to point out when something is being said that really is sexist or is racist. Mm-hmm. And it takes everybody to do that. It's not fair to put it on the women or on the people of color, or for different, or the underrepresented groups, whether someone's disabled. It's not fair to put it on them. The rest of us have to be tuned into that too, and be able to say, just a moment here. When that was said, then this person's being left out, or this person. I'll give you an example. When I was Assistant Deputy Attorney General, I always had an Indigenous chief of staff for me, or my executive assistant. But once the person came to me and said, the lawyers are really upset. The Indigenous people here are really upset because the lawyers keep talking about winning the cases against the First Nation groups. And I said to the team of lawyers after the litigators, I said, it's really important that we not talk about winning. It's hard for litigators to not talk about winning, because that's what they're geared for. But to really talk about, these are legal issues that need to be resolved. Because no, it isn't right to say that continues that old colonial mentality almost of the war, and that's not what we want. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to say, yes, there are issues that need to be resolved, but that doesn't mean we're on opposite sides. It's like in any situation, you need some clarification before we can move forward with whatever has to be done. And so, but that was an eye-opener. And I had, we created a diversity group led by some of my younger diversity teams. And they were very effective in saying, we need to think about some of the words that we say. And that's so important today. And there's a whole lot of these things. You see that where they say, well, if you say this, really that old expression is racist in many ways.
Yeah.
But you use it because you never thought of it that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Rosalind, on the chat, if anyone wants to take a look, she just shared an event that's disagreeing without shaming. So she shared a link there.
Which is great. You've had a lot of experience, Rosalind, I can tell, and that's wonderful.
Another question from our audience. How do you progress, or can you progress and move through your life stages? Sorry, I'm just trying to get this wording here. Okay, how do you progress and move through your life stages, but also have that realization that you can't do it all? Like, how do you stay in that game and move through life stages and kind of get past the fact that you can't do it all?
If you assume you can't do it all, maybe you can't do it all at the same time, but you can do a lot over your lifetime. And so, you know, when I was, and I'll give you an example, when I had my children were young, I didn't have time, and I had big jobs. I didn't have time to go out and do a lot of volunteer work. But when my children were grown up, I have the time now to do volunteer work, which I've been doing a lot of over the last years. And so I think that you can do it all, depending on what that all is. If it's the all of what you want to do, but maybe not at all at the same time. And I think we just accept that there's different periods in our lives. When we have young children, and we have our children at home, our focus is on them more than anything. Sometimes it's on surviving, right? My oldest son, first year, he never slept day or night. So it was survival. I was teaching and trying to teach with no sleep. I don't think I did a very good job of either that year. But it's understanding that there are phases, and there'll be times in your life when you have more opportunity to do different things. But again, it comes back to what is the priority at that stage of your life. My stage of life is that I want to do things now that really matter, that really make a difference. Was that my stage when I had children? No, I was focused on, you know, raising my children and surviving, right?
Yes. Okay. Do you have any specific comments or suggestions for single parents who are taking care of growing children but wanting to advance or having fulfilling careers? So I don't know if you worked with mentoring anyone with that, or like a single parent. How do they, you know, have their family time but also work on their careers?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a single parent. I've been a motorcycle widow on a lot of weekends, but I think it really comes back to each individual. What is the support system you have around you? Because that is one of the most important things. If you have a strong support system, like one woman was doing her PhD, she had 4 kids, she was a single mother. She lived in an apartment where there was other women in the apartment who said to her, while you're off at school, we'll help, we'll do your laundry, we'll watch your kids for the hour or two, whatever until you get back and stuff like that. So it took a village, it took the village, you know, so it really is what kind of support system that you have and how strong is your drive. Because I had a single mother, a friend of mine, who she was doing her PhD and she had her child and she went to Germany to do her thesis. And she managed it. She put her son in school. I mean, she would work later at night. She probably didn't get as much sleep. But that's, you know, if you want it bad enough, you'll do it. But it's not, I mean, in some instances, you may have to put it off for a while. You may not be able to do it all at the same time. And I'm not judging, I'm not telling you that I know the answers. I think it really depends on where you're at that particular time. What is your support? And the biggest thing is your support system. What kind of support system do you have around you? Because if you have no one to support you and help you, and you're looking after a baby 24/7, you're not going to get a lot of spare time to do much. And it depends on you. Not everybody can do as much as someone else. We all have different abilities and stamina. And I think we just have to recognize that and be gentle with ourselves. You know, it may be that, okay, I have to put this off for a year or two, and then I'll do it. Or with my strong support system, I can do it now.
Okay. So I'm going to end the questions there unless someone else has any other questions that they want to pipe in. We just have a few things that we need to go over with WXN, some upcoming events. Claire, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today and joining us and speaking about your book and giving advice to all of these women that joined us today. I will be sending out a link of the recording of today's session, and as well a link to purchase Clare's book. It's an amazing book, chocked full of advice, and we're just so thankful that you were able to spend time with us today.
Thank you, Virginia. You've been a wonderful questioner, and I really thank all of the people who were here and sharing their wisdom with each other as well, which is what this is all about, right?
Definitely.
We all have something to contribute.
Okay. So thank you. And I just have a few slides that I'm going to go over with everyone from the audience. I think Gary's going to take over the screen here for me. So yeah, here's the information about Clare's book. So you can actually purchase it through the publishing company that Clare went with, the Friesen Press. It's on the store, and if you search Clare Beckton, then you'll be able to find her book and purchase it. And I'll share that as well when I share out the recording later. And we have lots of other authors, top 100 winners. We're booked right into, I think, as far as June now of 2021. So our next author is Patricia Karen Gaggett, and she was with us for our Art in the Box. And she's a top 100 Hall of Fame. So she'll be next with us in October, sharing Karmic Alibi. And we are doing a WXN feature member feature every week this year. So just watch for that in our social media posts and in e-blasts. This week we're featuring Lauren McDonald. And it's just a way that we're sharing the stories of our WXN members. As well, if you would be interested at all in a membership with WXN, we are having a special offer that runs from now until the end of December for $99 for membership or $8.25 a month. Right now, we're ramping up for our 2021 Wisdom Mentoring program, and we have been featuring some of our mentors that will be mentoring next year. Sibel, Carrie Ann, Nandini, and Rola are just 4 of the mentors that will be working with the program next year. So our Wisdom Mentoring Program registration is now open. Members can enjoy a discount of $900 for the program, and a non-member $1,200. And there's also equal payments available for each of those options. And that will run from January to December of 2021 with classes and webinars all the way through, as well as 4 sessions with your top 100 winner. We also have lots of other virtual events coming up every Monday until we're booked all the way into next year, the end of next year. Every Monday, we're having Monday Mojo sessions with WXN ambassadors. We have 2 more this month with Ritu and Gupta and Tara Wilson on the 21st and 28th. Now, those do sell out fast, so if you want a chance to join those, make sure that you register. We also have our Unite and Rise webinar series running in October and November of this year with a workshop in October, Brene Brown's Rising Strong. And then, of course, our Canada's Most Powerful Women Top 100. Our judging is now complete. We have the list of winners. It's under embargo right now. And we'll be revealing those at the beginning of December, and we'll be celebrating those winners together with our summit and our gala, which will be one package, a virtual awards package that will get you 1 ticket to all of our events. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Claire, so much for joining us today. And we really appreciate the support from the community attending our events. Thank you, everyone.